Chris. Let's see what it does right here in this draw.
Where I'm at, looking, that looks like a back rocky top. You know what hotel exactly? I'll let it make it.
Get hold of me. The bar is pretty good. It's like straight down to all these big hotels down through there.
It's gonna happen.
Potential to run up to the top of the ridge. And smoke is pushing to the northwest at this time.
Where I'm at, looking, that looks like a back rocky top.
Safety James to Tom. I'm going to drive through the subdivision and see if I can get a good...
Good morning. Welcome to ORNL's Earth Day. My name is Teresa Nichols. I co-lead the Sustainable Campus Initiative with Melissa Lapsa. I don't know where, she's back there. And so we're happy that you're here starting off our Earth Day. 49 years, I think Earth Day's been celebrated, and it really is on Saturday, but we didn't want to work on Saturday, so we're celebrating today. We're kicking off with a really interesting seminar, and I appreciate you all coming. And then we're going to move over to Main Street because we've got experts on site to talk about residential HVAC lighting in your homes. Also beekeepers, master gardeners, so we want to do some gardening and stuff this summer. So please move over to Main Street. I know Sustainable Campus has got some free giveaways. We want you to see that. So there's lots going on in Main Street, so don't just stop here with this seminar. Please move over there. At this time, I'd like to introduce Neil Giffen, who is our manager for our natural resources management here at ORNL, and he'll introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Well, I just want to echo Teresa. Thanks very much for coming this morning. I think it's going to be an interesting presentation for you all. Just a little bit on the Natural Resources Program. It's charged with performing natural resource management on the 33,000-acre Oak Ridge Reservation. So we're charged with management of the entire reservation. Responsibilities include wildlife management, forestry, management of native grasslands and communities, invasive plant management, as well as numerous other natural resource management areas. Our program is based out of ORNL. We use subject matter experts from the Facilities and Operations Directorate, as well as Environmental Sciences Division, and also full-time wildlife managers with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency are on site. We also collaborate with numerous other agencies and entities to perform our work. Okay, I'd like to first introduce Greg Bird. Greg's interest in Oak Ridge Reservation forestry and history was kindled during a summer internship he did here at ORNL in 1977. So he's been around a while. Soon after that, he earned a bachelor's degree in forest management from UT. He is currently the Oak Ridge Reservation Forest Stewardship and Wildland Fire Program Manager with over 25 years of experience as a forester on the reservation. He maintains the wildland fire pre-plans for DOE and emergency management and serves as a subject matter expert for DOE on reservation roads and trails, forest health, and timber harvesting. Greg also supervises and coordinates prescribed burns on the reservation for DOE. He regularly collaborates with U.S. Forest Service, Tennessee Division of Forestry, University of Tennessee, and others. He's on various different forest health projects, including studies on insect pests such as the hemlock woolly adelgid that impacts our hemlocks on the reservation, and the emerald ash borer, which is now devastating ash trees on the reservation. Greg has also mentored numerous interns in forest health and other forestry projects. The second speaker today is Bruce Miller. He's currently forestry technician for the Tennessee Division of Forestry with jurisdiction over Anderson County. Bruce is a veteran wildland fire specialist with 34 years of experience in fire suppression, structure protection, and incident command. Bruce's expertise is evident in the fact that he is called on regularly by the U.S. Forest Service to fight wildfires nationwide, including roles as incident commander on numerous fires. He has also served as an instructor for the National Fire Academy of Colorado, Texas, and Tennessee. Bruce has also received numerous awards and recognitions for his work on wildfires across the nation. He serves the role of fire boss on prescribed burns here on the reservation and is a first responder on any wildfires that may occur here. Bruce was among the early responders on the Chimney Tops 2 fire that impacted Gatlinburg back in November 2016. I'll hand it over to Greg now.
Thank you. Teresa, thank you for inviting me to speak today at the ORNL Earth Day celebrations. Started off, I thought I'd describe our agenda for the day. Bruce will be discussing the Chimney Top 2 fire, also known as the Gatlinburg fire, the Sevier County fires, the perfect storm of all wildfires in Tennessee, one of the largest we've had. Following him up, can it happen here? I'll discuss the ORR, Oak Ridge Reservation wildland fire history, the reservation's fire fuels, and some discussion on the prescribed burns. And then Bruce will close us with a discussion of the FireWise program. I first met Bruce about 16 years ago at a small fire just outside of Y12. At the time, my impression was wildland fire was very unusual on the reservation. So as he was packing up and leaving from that one, I thought to myself, we'll never see him here again. But to show you how wrong you can be sometimes, here in the past 4 weeks, we've had 3 wildfires and we can't seem to get rid of this joker. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce and let's hear about Gatlinburg.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good morning. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here and talk with you all today about the Gatlinburg fire that happened from November 23rd through November 28th. A little bit leading up to that, the fire season in Tennessee normally stretches from October 15th through May 15th. Last year, we were in an extended drought that lasted almost 90 days. Our fire season began for us as firefighters about the last of September, the 1st of October. We started to pick up several small fires. Those of us with several years of experience could foresee the coming fire season as this area experiences situations like this on an average of 12 to 15 year rotations. And then you'll go into a 2 or 3 to 5 year cycle. So what we started to see was too little rain in the latter part of August and into September. We looked at some of the weather patterns. We knew that this was going to lead to larger fires because when you get into a situation like that, a lot of the trees will hold onto their leaves, and in a deciduous hardwood forest, that can lead to increasing fire intensity and spread because as the trees maintain their leaves, they continually fall even after the fire's gone through, rekindling new fires. So it presents us with a problem of trying to suppress them because as we experienced leading up to Gatlinburg, we were having fires that were rekindling and breaking out again that were 3-4 weeks old. So we were having to resend resources back to those fires that we thought were contained and controlled. And then we noticed here on the reservation as we were doing some prescribed burns, we were getting extremely hot fires. We were getting green vegetation kill off. So we knew this was coming. Prior to Gatlinburg, I had been in charge of the fire at Walden's Creek called the East Millers Cove fire. It was 1,501 acres right outside of Wallen. I had several resources assigned. I have contacts with the U.S. Forest Service that when this fire broke out, contacted me the night that I was there and said, Bruce, you better get a handle on this fire because with the fire conditions that you have, this fire could go to 18,000 acres if you do not get it stopped, which would put the fire in Wallen in downtown Pigeon Forge. So we put a very concerted effort with the U.S. Forest Service bringing in heavy tankers and started to drop on it with slurry, the pink stuff you see on that comes out of the airplanes as a retardant. It's a fertilizer we drop to slow the fire's progression. On Thursday of that week, I heard about the Chimney Tops 2 fire breakout. It's in a very remote, isolated area of the National Park Service, and it is actually located back here. This is the Chimney Tops 2 area. This view is from Campbell Lead, just above Gatlinburg. We started to watch and monitor all the fires. We had 26 large fires going on at the same time that this fire broke out around East Tennessee. And when I say large fire, that means any fire over 100 acres. We had brought in outside resources from Alaska, Oregon, Florida, any states that were available, but also at the same time the rest of the South was suffering from the exact same things we were with extreme drought and high fire activity. Going on to the November 28th, I got up that morning. I went over to the Wallen Creek fire checked it out. Everything was good. We still had about 80% leaf on at that time, and this is getting right towards December where we should have almost no leaves left on the trees. We had no rain, no wind up to this time of any significance to move the leaves off. So I started getting reports that the Chimney Tops 2 fire was increasing. The smoke column had gone from vertical to horizontal. The topography in the Gatlinburg area is Gatlinburg sits in the big drainage coming off of Mount LeConte, which in fire business, if you have large drainages, that means they act as chimneys like in your fireplace. They funnel the fire. Well, as you can see here, the fire was here and it just led right down this drainage. So I got the call at about 10 o'clock that our resources might be needed in Gatlinburg because they've lost sight of the fire. We had seen that there was a spotting. The fire was originally in this area, and this is Gatlinburg. The first spot was spotted somewhere around here, discernible spot. That's almost 3 miles from where the fire was. This is at 11 o'clock. So we deploy our resources. We were stretched thin due to the other conditions, so we only had about 19 of us to respond. And our jurisdiction was to go into Gatlinburg and start to build line and size up the situation right there along the Gatlinburg Park Service boundary. To give you some perspective of what transpired over the next 12 hours, this is the Gatlinburg fire, this is the Oak Ridge Reservation. So the fire was right here. And from 11:30 that morning, till 11:30 that night, that's how far that fire would have gone. So it would have went through the reservation plumb to Oliver Springs. So this is what was forthcoming for us as resources assigned to the fire. So the fire is located up in the National Park Service. It's around 400 acres, predicted at around 10:30 that morning. We got the call, we responded, we arrived in Gatlinburg at around 12:30. We got a briefing from the Park Service IC, Greg Solinsky. He said the fire's been spotted 3 miles ahead of where it was last known. Couldn't see anything, the smoke was so thick. When I got into Gatlinburg, visibility was about 100 feet. Sustained winds aloft were about 20 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. So we have it here. Here's Gatlinburg. We're stationed right there outside of Minot Park at the Park Vista, Baskins Creek area. I, with my 10 people and one dozer, decided we were going to construct some line from Minot Park up Park Vista Hotel over behind Baskins Creek. The problem being is we couldn't see anything, so we don't know where this fire is. We know it's up there ahead of us. We know it's coming at us, but we don't know what to expect. Because if you're getting spotting at 3 mile distances, interstates are not going to stop this thing. Predicted winds from the National Weather Service out of Morristown said we were to get sustained winds of 60 miles an hour starting at around 6 to 7 o'clock that night. So we went in and we started building a line. And we started down here at Minot Park. It's up Twin Creeks Trail, and we built a hand line behind these houses and around this way, up over the Park Vista Hotel, tied it into Turkey Nest, took it into Baskins Creek. My area I was in charge of was from Asbury Road, Minot Park area over here to 321. The fire at 3:30 was spotted here above Park Vista. So I was unsure as to what to expect. Was the fire going to go this way? Was it going to go this way? We're not sure, so what we did was we took a wait-and-see action. We just constructed line. We started protecting houses and doing all we could to triage and save as many of these areas as we could possible, because this is a large area and there's very few of us. All in all, there were less than 39 of us to fight this whole fire. At 6:02, we had lines in, and at 6:02, I was right here, and the video that y'all saw previous to this was all taken from around the Park Vista area here. It was taken in this area here down around Baskins Creek, and it was taken in the Minot Park area. At 6:02, the fire crosses the city limits. At 6:17, it's spotted north of Highway 321 on the spur. At 7:05, it's in Pigeon Forge. So, we immediately realized when all these calls came in that we were not going to stop this fire. We have multiple heads. We have a head of fire going this way, we have a head of fire going this way, and we had one going right through town. So our best bet was to protect what we could. So we gathered our resources together. We ponied up down at Minot Park and Park Vista, and we saved every single house that we set out to save. Over 49 homes in the Minot Park area. The first two houses lost in the Gatlinburg fire were right here below the Park Vista, off of the Twin Creeks Trail Road. They were literally planted on the side of the hill. There's nothing we could do. So we decided right then we're going to do everything we can just to go into structure protection and save as many homes as we could. Unfortunately, when we got up to the turkey nest area and we started, the fire had come through, and there had been so little done around those houses with the leaves and the piles of brush and stuff and the tight drainages, we just couldn't do anything. The majority of these houses were lost, as well as those. At 10 p.m., by 10 p.m., the fire calls were coming in all over Sevier County. At 8:30, the Gatlinburg cell tower went down due to an overload of cell traffic and increased in phone calls, and so we had to solely rely on radio traffic because there's only one cell tower in Gatlinburg. So as the fires came in, this is directly below Park Vista. As the fires came in, it just literally spread from one house to the next, just like firewood stacked up. There were 2,460 structures lost in the Gatlinburg fire. So in that 12-hour period, there were over 200 structures consumed per hour while this fire was active and burning. What we were dealing with as firefighters, normally, as I said earlier, the smoke column is vertical. This smoke column was horizontal. So it had collapsed, what we call collapsed. It had collapsed and it was laying on the ground. So our visibility was virtually zero. This is Park Vista at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We couldn't see anything. Traffic was to a standstill. We were having to communicate where we were moving, when we were going, what our operators were doing for safety's sake. This fire truck here was actually leaving that night, couldn't see, and ran into the guardrail coming off of Park Vista. The winds came in around, like they said, 6, 7 o'clock. They got up to 60 miles an hour. 87-mile-an-hour winds were clocked at a little after 10 o'clock that night. I was called upon to go to the Park Vista Hotel. There were about 40 or 50 people inside there that were trapped. And on my way up the Park Vista Road, a 28-inch tree had fallen across the only access to and from Park Vista. It took us almost 30 minutes to cut this huge oak tree out of the road. When I got to the Park Vista, the winds at that time peaked at around 75 to 80 miles an hour. And we had our hard hats on, and just to give you some semblance of what it was like was, if you turned your back to the wind, your hard hat would fly off even with a chin strap on. I turned my pumper unit to try to put out the awning at the Park Vista, and I turned it on as high as it would go, and I stood right about 4 feet from the burning flame, and I could not hit it. It was all dissipating and blowing right back in my face, and we were literally having to lean into this wind because it was hurricane force winds to put that fire out. Shrubs were on fire. Gravel was flying through the air. You couldn't see. Smoke was just as if you were standing in a blast furnace. The fire activity, most people that I've talked to, and I've given several presentations around the state and to different organizations, they are under the impression that this fire came out of the mountains as a solid wall of fire. And it actually didn't, because the best way I can describe this fire is if you had a big pile of leaves in your yard, you set it on fire, and then 4 or 5 of you stood behind it once it was fully consumed with leaf blowers and put you on the other side and just blew the pile right at you. It came more as a volcanic shower of ashes and fire all over the Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge area, which was evidenced by all the various fires you see on the periphery of that. The areas where you did actually see flame links, we're talking 30, 40-foot flame links. One thing is, like I said earlier, the leaves on the trees were still on. So as the wind blew, those leaves fell, adding more fuel to the fire. So if somebody had taken and cleaned out around their house with a 70-mile-an-hour wind, that was blowing all these leaves up against their houses, and even then they were catching on fire. The gutters were catching on fire. The shrubs, the mulch piles, it was that dry. So then we were into this, we were advising the municipalities of the fire status so that they can make a determination of what their evacuation plans should be. So what came of all this in the 12 hours that we were there, and what we saw was, as far as the Oak Ridge Reservation is concerned, you have to make sure that you use your public access, or public address systems, be compliant with the NFPA rules and standards. You do a great job of maintaining your campuses. Leaf removal, hazard tree removal. Like I said, we had green trees falling over in these winds. And homeowners can take away from the same thing. Clean out around your houses. This is very simple stuff. Keep the leaves out of your yards, out of your gutters. Keep your shrubbery away from your house. Green shrubs were burning in these conditions. So just because it's green, you don't think it'll burn, or it's mulch, you don't think it'll burn, it will. As the other departments here, you update your facility and pre-fire plans, do prescribed burnings, do fuel reductions. When I was first asked to do this, the question came into my mind, it says, Gatlinburg fire, can it happen here? Yeah, absolutely, it can happen here. It's not can it happen, what is the probability that it will happen here? And the probability, due to what various departments in this Department of Energy and UT Patel have done, have reduced that probability greatly. You've got ample setbacks, you do a good maintenance around buildings, you follow all the safety procedures, you compliance with NFPA rules about keeping out the roofs cleaned, mulches and beds trimmed back and all that. So the probability is very low. But don't be complacent and think it cannot happen here. It can happen here. It can happen everywhere. I've been on fires all over this nation, and I've seen fires burn where you never think. I've fought fire when it's 6 inches of snow on the ground here, and you go up 2,000 or 3,000 feet out west, and you've got a raging forest fire. So, yes, it can happen. But I think overall the reservation has done an excellent, excellent job of being proactive in mitigating that to an acceptable level, to where if it does happen, the campuses will not be impacted. Greg? And here we go. And let's see. Oh, additional steps. I forgot. I'm sorry. I had. And we do this. We drill for wildfire scenarios here. We encourage the fire departments to come out and observe our burns. This photograph here is on at ETTP. Doing some burning there, prescribed burning of switchgrasses. So you can see what kind of fire activity we actually do get here. And the prescribed burning is a good way to mitigate a lot of the issues that might arise. Expand fuel bed mitigation efforts. And Greg, can it happen here?
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for the spoiler. Yes, it can happen here. The here I'm interested in is the Oak Ridge Reservation. While we're talking, I guess you're going to be thinking about your own here. This is the Oak Ridge Reservation. It's 33,000 acres. 23,000 acres of it are forest land. As you can see from this aerial image, we're pretty much a green island surrounded by suburban and urban development. We'll call that our urban interface. It's where development meets the forest. That's usually a problem area, as Gatlinburg found out. It's a problem area for residents. This is our urban interface depicted as number of dwellings per square mile, or per acre in this case. As you can see, there we go. This gives us an idea of where exactly the reservation touches urban development, and you're here, maybe among one of these houses. So this is a chart of all the reservation wildfires that have been documented since 1966. What kicked it off was we had a large 400-acre fire near the Walker Branch watershed, and that is fire number 1 on this chart. But otherwise, you'll notice that most of these dots will sort of align with the thin black lines that represent roads, or the slightly wider pink lines that represent power lines. Now, in 51 years, the average occurrence of a fire was less than 1 per year. Okay, until this month. We've had 3. What's going on? I've had to update these 2 slides twice, and I stopped updating it after the last one. But, these are the causes of our reservation wildfires. Debris burning being our number 1 cause. Usually that's an escaped contractor's fire. That doesn't happen much anymore. We've centralized our reservation burning into the Hawks Nest Burn Facility, where we do very controlled burns there. Lots of those dots were associated with the roads, were started by smokers. And we haven't had a lot of those lately. I'd like to think it's because fewer people are smoking these days, but I've later learned that they've developed tobacco to be resistant to smoldering after they're flicked out, so yeah. I'm gonna stick with you guys ain't smoking anymore. Power lines. Failures of power lines were our 3rd most, or now, yeah, it's still 3rd, frequent cause of fires. The reservation is loaded with utilities. If you've gone out and looked around, we've got power lines running around everywhere and building new ones every day, even as I speak. The last fire happened to be a research facility developing some power line technology. Guess we're still trying to understand what exactly happened, but it touched off a 2-acre fire that was quickly dealt with by Mike Masters' crew and Bruce Miller's team. But what's really interesting is we don't have a big arson, excuse me, a big arson problem here. Arson is nearly absent. It's like 5% of all of our fires, but statewide it's probably more like 33%, I think. Why is that? Well, controlled access. That reduces the incidence of folks coming in and setting fires. Most of those arsonists are not badged. So that's taken a huge opportunity for wildland fire starts to occur here. We also have limited recreational use on the on the reservation. Well, legal recreational use on the reservation. Officially, we have no campfires and no camping. We have noticed that there is a preponderance of campsites along the lake shore, and that is a cause of concern for us. We have less severe terrain than the surrounding mountains. Our ridges aren't exposed to the solar drying that, say, those around Gatlinburg were. We've also got a higher density of roads and trails. We've got 85 miles of maintained roads on the reservation. In fact, 55 miles of those are maintained specifically as fire roads. We keep them at a minimum width of 20 feet, a height clearance of 13.5, 14 feet. They're designed to accommodate municipal fire apparatus. But the roads also allow commuters to come and go, and commuters are our best fire detectors. How many 911 calls did we get last week for the... I understand LSS literally stopped answering the phones. There's so many people going by and noticing the smoke and fire that they flooded LSS. Another factor in our favor here on the reservation, we've got 3 on-site fire departments. So we get a quick detection, we can get a quick response. That's kept our average fire down to 2 acres. It was down to about 3/4 of an acre before this past week. Also, in our favor, we have fuels that kind of work towards us, for us. This slide was developed by the South RAP program. It's from a report generated by that program. It's recently developed by the Southern Foresters Group. We've generated this report that shows the burn probability of our fuels. As you can see, ours are in the moderate to low range, but just on the outside where people are, grassy fuels of rural areas, those areas are more likely to burn than the reservation. In fact, they're probably more likely to have fires come onto the reservation, which actually did happen in one of those last 3 fires. Depicted graphically, most of our acreage is in the moderate to low zone. We also have a low rate of spread among our wildland fuels. This is depicted in chains per hour. A chain is 66 feet. So the lowest green colored areas, that leaf litter will probably support fire movement of about 330 feet per hour. That's pretty slow. We can catch up to that. On the upper end, we've got grassy fuels. For instance, Friel's Bend here, Solway Bend. We have an anomaly here. This is the spallation neutron source. So there's still a lot of ground checking that needs to be done with the data. There's no longer much grass there. It's been developed. So our data set might be a little bit dated, but it still gives us some valid locations to look at to consider fuel remediation. And again, the acreage based on rate of spread. We're in the good place. None of this stuff down here. I call this slide the Smurf pizza. This is the depiction of the various fuel types on the reservation. And what you can tell from that, it's very discontinuous. They're just splotches and a mosaic of everything here. The deep blue is forests and forest fuel types that will be on the ground. The gray areas are the developed areas, and then you just got a plethora of different fire types. Each one of those is a change that a flame front would have to encounter, and it gives you an opportunity to stop a fire. We've also have it broken up by roads and streams, development. All these things tend to make a discontinuous path for a flame front to carry through. Okay, this is a gratuitous Earth Day type slide. This one depicts the reservation change in forest from 1941, the time of federal acquisition, to 2012. In 41, it was about a 50-50 mix of forest and pasture land. 16,780 acres is what we determined from the old topo maps, compared to 23,570 acres today. That's an increase of 40% more forested area, so score one for carbon sequestration. All right. This slide is going to depict fire intensity, those fuels that will have the most energetic and difficult to control fires. It also tends to depict where our densest pine stands are. This is a great chart to refer to for planning where fuel remediation might need to take place. And again, mostly we're in the good spot here, to the medium to low, but we do have some incidents here that we'll deal with. One of our favorite methods for dealing with dense young pine is grinding and mulching. We've partnered with ORNL utilities to acquire even more robust machinery than this to thin out the pine. The big picture here, we're looking at kind of a before view. It's just a dense mat of greenery. This is the machine we use. It's a skid steer that has a brush cutter on it. And we just drove lanes through this stand, and you can see how we've busted up the old dried fuel left over from the pine beetle epidemic. We've mulched it, and we've also reduced how much pine we have in that stand. So we're reducing the wildland fire hazard. We're also accelerating tree growth, and we're getting a separation of the canopy fuels from the grass ground fuels. We're relieving the stressful growing conditions that would make trees more prone to not only fire, but insect attacks and drought. And opening up the stand also improves access in and around it. You can get into the stand, you can go in and monitor for invasive plants, and go in and spray and treat them. So overall, that's helping a lot of things. I know our wildlife people love it. In fact, they want us to thin more and more and more. They like the habitat that is being developed as we open up the forest floor. Here's an aerial view. You can see side by side, we have a stand where we've treated here. This is around Hawk's Nest Burnyard. And this is untreated pine here. And you can see how flame could move pretty quickly through that canopy. Whereas down here, it's more broken up. This one was taken while the action was still in progress. We slice and dice and open up lanes in both directions. This other slide is showing the Bethel Valley Highway 95 area. This is going into the Central Training Facility shooting range. We've done some work there. We've selected two sites in this case where ignitions might likely occur. This is, like I say, the burn yard. So improving the vegetation around it is going to help prevent that fire. This is also shooting range, but also along Highway 95. And as you saw from the map before, a lot of our fire starts are associated with a road, 95 in particular. That was one tool for dealing with mitigating fuels. The other is prescribed burning. Neil mentioned that I was the program manager for the Wildland Fire program. Wildland fire refers not just to wildfire, but any type of fire, whether controlled or wildfire, that are in the forest and grasslands. To date, we've burned more acres on purpose in 10 years than wildfire has consumed in 50. So we're really good at burning things down when we want to. Our burns are really a collaboration of several parties. We've got to have DOE on board with it. They approve the burns. Of course, Battelle supplies me and the fire departments. The Division of Forestry, they are our actual burn crew. We get a great deal of assistance from TWRA. In fact, I could say they are probably our greatest customer for prescribed burning. Occasionally, we work with Y12 in the city of Oak Ridge and the Community Reuse Organization of East Tennessee, or CROAT. There are good times and bad times for prescribed burning. This is a bad time. Unfortunate timing, this was a group in Colorado that was going through training, and training day was scheduled unbeknownst that snow was due. So they did their best. But a good time to burn is when you're within a burn prescription. All of our burns are at the right specified parameters, dealing with humidity, temperature. We've got to have the right crew size. The wind's got to be out of the right direction. Our fire breaks have to be wide enough. It's just not, hey, let's pick up and go now and burn something. We wait, and sometimes it can't happen. There have been years where we've burned 5 acres where we plan to burn 400 or 500. Here's why we burn. Most of our fields started out as fescue fields, pasture land for cattle. And we've wanted to convert those over to native grasses. So here we're promoting quality habitat and replacing it with Indian grass, broom sedge, switchgrass, and others. Fire also helps eliminate other exotic plants besides fescue, autumn olive, and kudzu. And nothing burns like a kudzu fire. That might be the national fire of the South. We also burn to promote habitat for threatened and endangered species, and the classic one here on the reservation is Delphinium exaltatum, or tall larkspur. Past burns in 2011 and 2012 seem to have increased the number of plants within the population. It doesn't tolerate a lack of fire very well, and a lack of fire tends to promote its competitors, so it gets shaded out. So obviously, we're going to have to tend these populations to keep them prominent on the reservation. We have one of the largest populations of this species in the world. As Bruce pointed out, switchgrass is managed at K25 or ETTP. They demonstrate its management and growth, and they use TDF to do the controlled burns for it. This was a shot taken from 2009, and I had hoped when I took it that we could see some of the faces in the windows here, as they had mashed their noses right up to the glass. How far were we from the building? 25 feet. So when you can demonstrate that kind of finesse in managing fire, it's a good thing. And another reason we burn, and this one's kind of unusual, we open up a viewscape in front of a historic church. If any of you are out that way or commute that way, the wheat historical church is off Highway 58 near 95, near Blair Road. It used to be hidden behind a pine forest. When the pine beetles attacked that stand, we clear cut it. And for the first time in a generation or so, folks realized that there was this beautiful old church back in there. So when we began to replant the area, they requested that a certain angle of view from the highway be left open in grasses so that people could admire the building. So to keep it in grasses, we'll burn it. This will kill off the hardwood and tree growth that would eventually obstruct the view of the church. Okay, I'm going to turn it over here to Bruce, who will give us a quick word about Firewise. And then we'll move and go to Main Street.
Yeah, the U.S. Forest Service and the state of Tennessee have a Firewise program. This house here, I like to tell the story behind this house and with Firewise. It's off Wiley Oakley, and every house around this house was burnt. I pulled up from the backside and saw it smoking, and I was out of water. And I called for the fire department, who was in Gatlinburg, to come and assist, and they were trying to get up, but due to extraneous circumstances of other buildings and calls, they said it was going to take them a little while, and all I had was a chainsaw. So being a forestry person and working with chainsaws, I figured the best thing to do is save the house and just cut it down. So we climbed up there and we sawed the corner of the house off. And they had a nice pool table right there inside. So when the fire department came up, we were all standing in there playing pool. This is a perfect example of Firewise we promote to our homeowners. Gentleman had built his driveway down and around, and this is down slope here. I'm standing below the house. Driveway down and around. He'd cleaned out around it, the house. The only thing that caught on fire was he had a little bit from the leaves, like I spoke of earlier about the winds blowing the leaves. The leaves had collected under the deck, and it set the deck on fire, which in turn had started the side of the house. So we had to go up here and cut the railing off and hang. I held onto his feet while he hung over the side, and he started sawing the house, and then we sawed the rest of the house off. But I went back the other day, and you would never know that house is even burnt. They had completely restored the house to its original condition. What we like to talk about when we talk about Firewise, and I speak to homeowners, and after this presentation, if you come to Main Street, I do have free CDs and pamphlets on what you can do around your house to be more Firewise. Uh-oh. We're not changing? Oh, the mouse? Okay. So around your house, keep a 100-foot garden hose attached to your house. Move your storage sheds away. Avoid outdoor burning or move your compost piles away from the house. Have what we call 30 feet of defensible space mowed around it. Don't plant trees. I don't know if it says it on there, but I wouldn't plant a tree within 20 feet of my house. For one, the limbs impose upon your house and puts leaves in your gutters and stuff like that. But this here is a typical example of what we like to stress when we're talking to homeowners, because a lot of us like to have natural vegetation, or as myself and the 2 acres I live on, the woods, I like to have that natural habitat all the way around my house. So we like to strive on, if you're going to do that, to be a little bit more proactive and do a few things that you can help prevent. And when we pull up on a scene, we look at a house that's been Firewised or the homeowner's conscious, then we can go in there and we can defend that space. But if we go in and you've got all your wood piled up against the house or what have you, it makes it a little bit harder for us, because those embers get in those places and they start fires, and then the house itself is consumed. So, oops, oh, that's right, this is not working, is it? Okay. Now, Q&A. if the fire had happened on 95, say near Tower Shielding or over near Melton Hill, just say for example, I could apply all three of those to that fire. Intensity would be great because it would be an upslope, and the intensity would vary, as did the intensity in Gatlinburg. And the duration, yeah, it would burn. You had a contiguous fuel bed that would carry it, like we said, all the way. So.
Yeah, stay away from that. I checked with Kevin Birdwell, and on the night or day in question, at Tower D, that's our weather tower here on the west end of the campus, I believe they recorded a maximum wind speed about 200 meters up of about 63 miles an hour. And later that evening at 11 o'clock, while they were having a tornado in Monroe County, I believe he said it got up to about 75 miles an hour at a higher elevation. So we get those winds, but we're down in the valley, so it's kind of skirting across the top of us, but we were still subject to winds during that event. But generally you're true. In the higher elevations, they get those winds. Down here, it's just sweeping over our heads.
And one thing that I've noticed in my 34 plus years here is that as when a convective column on a fire this size gets to those winds aloft, now albeit say the winds here at the ridge tops on the reservation might have been 30 miles an hour, it would naturally act as a draw. So even though your winds aloft are higher, it will actually affect the ground fuel and fire activity, because as that wind lifts, creates its own weather, so it's going to pull it. So it's actually, the wind's actually what's sort of like grabbing a cart and just taking it with it. So you would in essence see an increase in fire activity. Not maybe to the extent that we saw in Gatlinburg because it was all downslope winds, which I was asked at one, what would you compare them to? And I said, I've been in Santa Ana winds in California, where you can get upslope and then they can turn and they can come right back downslope on you at high rates of speed. And I've experienced them over here in the Cumberland Mountains in Anderson, Scott, Morgan counties, and like I said, over in the Smokies. But here on the reservation, you are correct. I wouldn't see the influence as great, but on a situation that happened on the 28th, I would have expected, a lot more intense fire here, a lot quicker spread, and a lot greater duration than on any other day that we possibly would have had a fire. So once again, that also plays back into what I said earlier about the proactive measures taken by the various departments here on the reservation. You could have a fire of relatively high rates of spread and intensity, but the way the roads are, the way the campuses are maintained, your fire would be channeled into the heavier fuel areas and would be abated around the more sensitive areas.
We have time for probably another question or two. We've got to run over to Main Street, so please feel free to ask your question and come over to Main Street and meet with the guys. But let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Yes, sir. The convective heat just carried from one fire to the one structure to the next. The one thing that when I went to put the Park Vista, when I was called up to try to help with the Park Vista fire, was what I noticed was that building is made out of concrete. What failed on that was the little rubber seam around the window. The mulch beds were large, they caught on fire. There's a rubber seam in those concrete buildings that seals those windows. Well, it was hot enough right there to melt that seam and the window to fail, which let smoke into the building. The fire itself did not actually enter the building, but when the window failed, it created the vacuum which sucked the smoke into the building. So that was a concern, and I immediately found that out, and I met with Mike Masters, and I brought up that point to him so that he's cognizant of the fact that, you know, we can pass this information along. So there's little things that most people wouldn't notice. You know, we can pick those out and hopefully prevent that in the future. But that was the one instance that I noticed.
I noticed you were showing some UAS video feed.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help you guys to any extent on the ground in terms of how the fire was spreading and how to position your forces on the ground?
That FLIR flight was from the 26th and 27th, and we got that from the National Park Service, and they were utilizing that. Actually, we had them up flying all the other fires, and yes, they were a great help to us, and that's something that we've talked about in the past to utilize if we ever have any fires, whether it be on the reservation or not, that we can utilize to determine fire spread in which direction it might go early in the morning and where to assign our resources so that overnight we can see where the most of the activity was as per that video. Now in that video, one thing I'd like to stress, that was a daytime, and all those little spots you saw all over that was structures or stumps or something burning in the valley. So they were, that just goes to show you the intensity of everything that was still on fire. On one day, the 29th, I think was it started, I think there was 3 days in that FLIR flight there that we showed.
After a light rain also.
Yeah.
Who owned it? Who owned the FLIR flight?
I'm not sure. It comes out of SAC out of Atlanta. We just order it up. And it used to be a U-2 flight, but now I think it might be a P-2V from the Navy or something. I'm not quite sure who owns that. Any other questions? I have to say I've been on almost 3,000 fires in my career. I've been in Florida all the way to the state of Washington and all over. And this is one of those, I would say, probably the most traumatic fire that I personally have been on, where I felt when it came, the winds were so great, you couldn't stand up, you couldn't see. I could not see Greg standing there in the smoke and embers. And then to have, it was, the magnitude of it was to the point where I turned to some of my guys and I said, I sort of feel hopeless. I mean, albeit we saved every house that we made a stand. It was we with the Tennessee Division of Forestry personnel, we made a stand. We saved every house. It still felt like I didn't do enough because this is our community. This is my community. I mean, I work around these people and all, and I'm standing there at the Park Vista watching this place burn, and those 2 cars in there didn't burn. They were parked there, the whole fire, and they didn't burn. But from my perspective, I go around speaking, and I always want to impress upon people, please clean out around your houses and stuff, because I never want to see this happen again. This is very personal, and I appreciate. Yes, ma'am.
Most of us have fire pit of some sort out in the back. And do you know if those are, how are those working in neighborhoods? I mean, do you see a lot of consequences from those?
No, from October 15th through May 15th, you're required to get a burn permit, where you can get it vis-a-vis online with burnsafetn.org, or you can call the local county forestry department and get one. And usually we'll advise you when conditions are bad, or if you have to if there is a concern of the possibility of a spread of the fire or something. But normally we get into the fire pits and things like that, we don't really have an issue with that. What we normally have a problem with is people out burning their little leaf garden or something, and I laugh about it all the time because there was no wind when I lit it. It was all calm. But as soon as I lit it, it takes off. So.
Okay. Let's go eat.